If you're doing a rehab, an eco rehab, it has to be energy efficient. And you have to let them know how it is, the qualities that's in the house on it. But I think that probably the next aspect of it really is going to be more is safety. Indoor air quality is already being pushed up a lot, but we're going to have to start looking at that in ways that maybe we haven't before, because our children, have a lot more allergies and asthma. So when we're talking a safe home, it's not just from disasters. It's like a safe inside place for them to live too.
Hello, everyone. I am Izumi Tanaka. I am the host of this podcast, Home Green Homes. Today, I'm so excited to have Mary Love back to my show again. It's been a while since we did our last interview, but Mary Love is in North Carolina, and she is a grandmother of green homes, and it makes two of us grandmother of green homes.
Yeah.
And she is an accomplished green realtor in North Carolina and someone I respect very much. And today I wanted to talk to Mary about the subject that I have been what would be the word? I've been really trying to explore this subject matter for a long time. Mary have done some real estate development or investment, and this is something that I've been trying to really put across to all the people who are doing real estate investment. And I feel that this is a very important thing, especially for those investors who are flipping, so-called flipping, because we have all these housing stocks that are old and they were built, 50 years ago, some of them maybe even more than 100 years ago. And the newer constructions are being built with the modern technology and modern building codes. But I feel like those existing housing stocks are the main culprit of carbon emission. As we know, the building structures account for 40% of the carbon emission. So Mary, thank you so much for coming to talk to me again. I really appreciate it.
So I'm delighted to be here. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So let's dive in. If you can tell me a little bit about your background from your own words, who you are, as I said, a grandmother of green homes, but you have a very substantial background to call yourself that. So tell me about yourself a little bit.
Yes. Well, I've always been interested in it's been influenced from growing up on a farm. We were a sustainable farm when it was just being called poor dirt farmer. He didn't know better because he didn't afford anything else.
Right.
My grandmother, definitely, she was Cherokee, and so she influenced me a lot on the gardening and what we did with the land and preserving that. And then I had a uncle who was a builder. So I started building with him, fascinated by the building process, and was out there with my little tool belt when I was like 8 years old helping him. And so those two things together have always piqued my interest. And I've also have been a teacher. So over these years, I combined working with grants and education, the idea of sustainability. And then once I got to North Carolina, I became the project manager for the Greenbelt Alliance, and we created the North Carolina Greenbelt Certification Program. And then I started creating a lot of classes for realtors about green building. And in that process, I became a realtor myself because I was like, well, I need to know what they need to know for green building. So I am an investor. My wife and I have invested quite a bit. Primarily, we have focused at long-term rentals, and in that process of rehabbing the homes, we have focused on energy efficiency mainly, as well as dealing with sustainable landscaping. Those were our two big features. And then we also have done flips and gone through the process of what we worked on them before there was like Pearl certification and through that process. But now I do project management or consulting with investors, trying to make those homes as energy efficient and sustainable as possible.
Wow. So I understand that you may not have been actively flipping or developing in the last few years because I understand you had have some personal matters that you had to take care of, which is, I've gone through that myself in the last few years. But tell me about when you were actually actively investing, whether it's holding the properties to rent out or flipping. What were the criteria when you were looking for those properties? What were you looking for in what you invest in?
So if we're going to do something we're looking to be a rental, we are looking for, of course, good bones in the house and a house that has potential, fairly easy potential for upgrades. There's some easy things that you can do without tearing down the walls. Now, we've done flips where if we're gutting it, it's a lot easier, to do. But with the rentals, the first thing that we look at is how can we make the house more energy efficient? So number one is always insulation and air sealing. And that's pretty easy to do right off the bat. And this is something that we do. And with our property management company, we encourage all of our owners to do the same thing because we manage all of their projects. So almost whether it's our own properties or ones that we manage, they all become improved with insulation and air sealing. And then we go through and we make a list of which main item do we think is going to go out first. Is it the roof? Is it the HVAC system? Or what is it the windows? We start doing a cost analysis of what we think needs to be done the first. And we will go through the entire house of eventually replacing the HVAC systems, the water heaters, windows. Windows are the last thing we replace because usually the houses that we buy have already had windows replaced at one time and they're double paned anyway. So that's usually the last thing. But if we need to replace the siding, we will do an additional insulation at that time with the back of the siding. For roofs, at this point with roofs, we only do metal roofs because once they go in for long-term rental, they're going to last a lot longer than shingled roofs. And so part of what we're looking at, we do the upgrades. We know what code is and we move right above code. In some cases, if we're getting rebates, we'll go even better than just above code. But we're looking to have our rentals, whatever upgrade we're doing, we have it in mind that it's something that's going to last at least 25 years in the process. Now, not our HVACs don't always last that long, but our water heaters have actually we got high quality water heaters when we put them in, and some of those are just now, 20 years later, needing to be replaced.
Right. You were talking about some years ago, right, Mary? Because we talked about this before. Like you have been doing this way before, the word green homes or sustainability were such. I can't say it's mainstream quite yet, but it was a time when people were probably going up, right? So how did you market your properties, either to renters, tenants, or in the case of flips? So that's where your realtor Mary comes in, I think.
Definitely. And that is so for renters, one of the things that we would do is, and this was just our philosophy, is people first. Part of it's Earth Day. Happy Earth Day. It's Earth Day
Yeah,
today.
happy Earth Day. That's right. This is
Yeah,
the
yeah.
Earth Day.
People first. So we would be saying that we not charging higher rents because their electric bill was going to be lower. We just said, hey, this house is going, and we could prove it, for the electric if you don't open the windows while you have the heat on.
Yeah.
you know, your electric bill will be less, and that.
Yeah.
And that works like right now in this market. Our rental market has really slumped off because we have so many apartment complexes coming in to overtake. And so We always have invested in single family homes or duplexes.
I see.
Being more energy efficient. When we do an advertising, we talk about how the electric bill will not be half the payment is in some of the other buildings. In our area, we still have houses that have oil heat, and that's very expensive for them. When the last house that we remodeled to flip was 3 years ago, I think was 3 years ago. And what we did with that one is it's two things, because if you're doing for the appraiser, it needs to be all about numbers. So we took the upgrades that we did and took the price of what that upgrade was. And then I did a comparison of what a code was at the time. Because if we're rehabbing a house, we're moving it up to current code. So I would have a chart of what the current code was and then what the upgrade was. And then I did the additional price for the appraiser. Buyers don't really care that it costs that much more to do it, or they really don't care that much about the savings that it's going to do either. They care more about the fact that, they care about the savings, but most of them don't care about the number. It's going to save me $72 a month. They don't really care about that,
Yeah.
But the appraiser wants to know these things.
Right.
So we utilize our North Carolina checklist when we're doing a rehab. California has several checklists out there that you can utilize. And of course, the Pearl certification helps with that too. Now, because I'm a building scientist, I like to have it's not a HER score for existing, but I get a blower door score before, and then I do one after, and then I can do the calculations of how much savings and improvement, and I do videos with it, which is really fun to do it that way, because people are like, oh, wow, So, and we do blaster tests before and after, because there's a huge difference when we put in a new HVAC system, or if it's a good system and existing, we just seal the ductwork, and makes a big difference with that. But we do a whole cost analysis for the appraiser mainly, and to show them the upgrades that we have. And then we have that comparison with our checklist. So the appraiser, when they're looking at a house that's been rehabbed, they're not looking at just what we tell them is it's not just a regular rehabbed house. We want you to compare us to, like the last house we did was a complete overhaul, everything down to the studs, and it was all. So we said, this is like a Greenbelt certified house. And they valued that. The appraisers, we have some appraisers that are familiar with green building and green homes. And they were like, okay, yeah, you're telling us you've got the same type of HVAC this new construction house had. And so they could value that for us. When the market, and at the time, we didn't necessarily get higher than a new construction, but we got the same price as a Greenbelt new construction, which was higher than a general rehab. And at the time, we still had rebates out there that were pretty significant for us to get. So our costs really were not that much more. They really weren't. We probably paid more cabinet upgrades than we did on sustainable energy efficient upgrades.
Right.
Because of the rebates, so that was to our advantage for sure. Before I had looked in California to see what rebates they still have out there right now. And, there's still quite a few. Most of the rebates actually come from the utility companies or from within the counties themselves.
Yes, local.
Yeah, local. And I would just recommend to find out where, your local utilities and some nonprofits will also give you rebates and tax incentives. And so I highly recommend looking at that. If you're going to get into rehabbing with green, sustainable, resilient concept in mind, check out those first and see, because a lot of your utility companies will actually do audits of the house first. And that is so important. If you can compare, here is what this house was like before we started making these improvements. And then usually that evaluation from the utilities companies is free first. And then you usually have to pay a rater to come back in and do it afterward. But it's worth it. That's a huge way to market. And just be sure to video.
Right, exactly. Yeah, unfortunately, in California, I haven't found any local utilities that would actually provide the energy audit beforehand. But my question, since you mentioned appraiser, because my next question was, what were your challenges? And from my experience or from the conversations that I've had, one of the challenge was the appraisal, because a lot of appraisers are not familiar with those green feature. Was that the case for you? It sounds like you had appraisers who did appreciate what you've done. Yeah. If
Yeah.
there's anything else that you found challenging.
So we have fortunately 3 or 4 local appraisers that have been involved with our local organization of Greenbelt Alliance. So, we smooze them a lot. Our Greenbelt Alliance, we're like, hey, come to this and we'll give you a free meal so they can understand about it. And one of the things that I always tell my clients is that they can ask before the appraisal is in at the very beginning, does the appraiser have experience with green homes and green products? I went ahead and would get an appraiser as a seller, appraisal as a seller, because it's really hard because they're working for me at that point, right? And it's really challenging for a buyer's appraisal to come in a lot less within just a few weeks of one that we've had. So that's one of the things I recommend. If you're a seller doing this, it is worth the money to go ahead and educate your appraiser during the process that you hire. It's worth it. Once you've educated them one time, then they know more the next time too. So,
Were there any other challenges, especially earlier time when you started doing this kind of thing? What were the typical challenges that you ran into and how you handled them?
right. So I would say that what was really hard was actually getting subs to do what I was asking them to do. Fortunately, because I'm a building scientist and because I'd had all my networking within a nonprofit organization, which also had good relationships with our permitting office, it was I had a little clout to say, this is why we're doing what we're doing. But I got a lot of pushback from the not from the inspectors, but from the subcontractors at first. I mean, this is when so much things have changed. We were sealing the duct work with mastic, and half of the subs didn't even know what mastic was. So it was, I literally was getting in there with them and showing them what it was and showing them how it needs to go on and why it was good. And I had my own duct blaster. And I would go through and I had the smoke, and I put it through and I said, look, everywhere where the smoke is coming out is a leak. It's your job to seal it. I know that not everybody can do that. I will say though, if you're wanting to get into rehabbing sustainably, there are nonprofits out there that will come and bring a duct blaster or a blower door to your house to you. Yeah, because that's what they're doing, right? They want to help you do this, and they will come and help you, and especially if you can double promote their nonprofit in the process. Yeah. The HVAC contractors were the most challenging. A lot of the insulation companies, back then we were still using a lot of bat insulation.
Yeah.
And so what was important with the bat insulation was how it was installed. And I was being challenged, I was like, this is incorrectly installed. And I knew that it was going to make my blower door numbers worse because of the way it was installed. And I would ask them to come back and fix it, and they wanted to charge again. And I was like, no, this is not how it's happening. And, that was a big pushback. But now with the spray foam, it's not as, we air seal and insulate at the same time. So it's a lot easier. Yeah, but there were some, things like that. And then, of course, I had to really educate the consumer because they didn't know what it was.
Right. Now, so when you say consumers, and so those are the tenants and buyers, you said earlier that maybe they didn't care so much about the money you save and that type of thing. So how did you market? How did you market them? The Pearl came along. You had the Pearl provides such great materials for us to use, but you were doing that before Pearl, and
Right.
right?
Yeah, I was. And so it's funny that I'm glad you asked that because clarification, when we first started doing this,
Mm-hmm.
money was the thing. That was the thing that they wanted to know. Well, how much money was I going to save? How did that benefit me? That
Right.
was important to them.
Right.
Now, in this day and age, I think that people understand if it's Energy Star certified, there's a saving because it's so out there now, right? I mean, light bulbs, CSL, LED light bulbs will save you over CSL bus incandescent. It's there. They see those savings. So they don't really, because it's so common to them now, they don't pay attention to that as much. They're just, yeah, I mean, I think it's been overused, that, oh yeah, I know it's going to save me some money. Okay. But what else does it do? That's where they are now. It's like, what else does it
Yeah.
do? Yeah. But at first the money was very important. They didn't understand that those improvements made, especially the insulation. That was the hugest thing. They didn't understand how much of improvement that really made, And then when we went into when water savings, when I was first doing it, there wasn't anything about water savings, that came along later. And one of the biggest challenges that we had back then is when we were trying to use low flow shower heads and faucet heads. They were just the little area taps that we
Right.
used.
Right.
And they were horrible. Do you remember that? When
Yeah.
they were
Yes, I do.
terrible. I get calls from tenants like, what did you do to my water? Yeah. And, people would they used to have the original dual flush toilets and people would use more water trying to get the water down. And
Yeah.
they've come a long way now,
Mm-hmm.
a long, long way. But that was a challenge at first. But I actually had not my properties that I had sold, but my clients who had bought some had actually said, Mary, help me take this toilet out. So,
Wow.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we've made a lot of improvements over the
Mm-hmm.
years for sure.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things, if you're going to do green rehab, you need to look at your area. Like, what is the thing that is most noticed sustainably, most needed, most wanted? And we're experiencing a major drought here in Asheville now.
Mm-hmm.
And when I lived in California, there was always a drought, So, yeah. And finding really promoting about the water savings, the zero landscaping, replacing the turf, all of that could be, if that's the only thing you do and really promote that puts you up above just a standard house that's been rehabbed without that in
Right.
consideration.
Right. Now, though, Mary, so you were talking about how water element came in later. Now we're looking at resilience as well. You're in Asheville. You just had this major disaster only not even 2 years ago yet. And
Mm-mm.
here I am in California. We had this major fire disaster. I mean, that has to be also considered these days, right?
Absolutely. And I think it's a marketing opportunity for realtors, and it is most certainly for rehabbers. not only is it an opportunity to set yourself above and beyond, it's an opportunity to help your community. You know, if you're in there rehabbing more than one house at a time, it's huge. And it's called fortified standards. Are you familiar with that? Fortified
No.
standards. So fortified standards is dealing with the resiliency on building, and one of the things they look at is reinforced roofs. That's important. They look at the no burn zone. So if in the fire areas, they also look at potential, like what are you doing to mitigate potential flooding, which worked here, and they have these standards, and some insurance companies actually give huge discounts, especially for the roofs. That's the number one thing. And I think we're going to see that more. Uh, and I think that is a unused marketing tool. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. So my biggest question for you, I know you said that you consult other investors. I am having a hell of a time trying to convince investors to go green.
Yes.
And it's usually about the systems because it's more expensive. So do you believe that eco flipping, let's just call it eco flipping or green flipping, is that a feasible business model?
So when when you're in an area where there are tax rebates and incentives or rebates off of different products, most certainly, because as I said, when I was doing it, I spent more money on upgrading of the cabinets than I did of the water heater and
Right.
insulation and all that. So that comes through at different times, right? So pay attention to that when that's there. If you are in an area where like flooding for us in for Asheville, my story in my house, I built a greenbelt house and we had solar panels and backup batteries. And I had sited this house at a location where I knew it would be safe. It was away from the river, not up around it. And our house was totally fine, and we became like the community center for the neighborhood. Now, everybody here is thinking not just solar panels, but backup batteries. If you're in an area like especially on priced homes, it makes sense there. Of course, you've got to, those two things are icings on the cake. You got to have. However, and sometimes it's interesting, at the higher the price point, the easier it is actually to do an eco flip. It really is. It's more about highlighting those things that you did so the buyer knows that they're there, because a lot of stuff is hidden, right? They don't notice that.
Right.
And if you
Especially
just,
insulation. They're
right,
behind the walls, right? Yeah.
right. Or they may not notice even any of the water savings, which is huge in California,
Yeah.
and or the fortified standards that they're doing we just have to tell them that they're doing that. And then people want to be safe in their home now. We have so much with our climate change that's happening, and it's not just every 20 years anymore. We're seeing it every year. You used to say eco and green and safe and healthy. Now we're saying like safe homes.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think that it can be done. It really depends on your location, and it depends on your choices of what you do. You don't have to do it all. You can do, my motto is a little bit of something is better than a whole lot of nothing.
I agree. Yeah. Well, so what are your insights or vision or kind of an outlook for anybody who is thinking about flipping with this idea of upgrading to modern standard of sustainability, climate sustainability, resilience? and safety. What do you think is happening in the coming years?
So we're already seeing it in the discussion of just, for at first it always comes through the nonprofits, the government structures. That's because that's the groups that's looking out a little farther. But we're seeing it now among homeowners just talking because it's just so common that there's one disaster after the other. And they are looking, what can I do to my house? They're asking the questions. What can I do to my house to make it more resilient? That's really the question now. It used to be about energy efficiency. That's important, absolutely, especially as our energy costs go up. I do think that as this push with the data centers are going on, that energy efficiency improvements in a home will become just something that's, automatically expected. I think if you're doing a rehab, an eco rehab, it has to be energy efficient. That's just, and you have to let them know how it is, the qualities that's in the house on it. But I think that probably the next aspect of it really is going to be more is safety. Indoor air quality is already being pushed up a lot, but we're going to have to start looking at that in ways that maybe we haven't before because our children, have a lot more allergies and asthma.
Yeah.
So when we're talking a safe home, it's not just from disasters. It's like a safe inside place for them to live too. And that conversation, this is my, it's my world. So of course the people I have, are in it, but people that I wouldn't expect are for us, especially in our area, being hit by the hurricane, are talking about it. Like, what can we do different?
So are you available for anybody who might be thinking about doing what we call green flip or eco flip in any parts of the country?
Well, thanks for asking that. I do preliminary research to see what is available within their state, county, and local districts. And from that point, they're going to have to do some of their own that I might not find because mine is an online search and maybe networking with some of the people that I have over the years.
Right.
Yeah.
But as far as the details of here's this step needs to be done and what that, absolutely, because that's pretty much the same regardless of where you live.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
That's
And
great.
then, if you have a hoarder house, then we've got a whole different conversation.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
So tell
Yes.
me how people can find you, Mary.
Yes. The best thing is to email me,
Uh-huh.
Mary@lovethegreen.org.
Love the
Mary
green.
at lovethegreen.org. And you can go to my website, lovethegreen.org, and been off my blog for a little bit, but usually I have information about rehabs and ideas and suggestions and recommendations. Yeah.
That's so wonderful. I am so glad I got to talk to you because this is like a topic that I have been having a lot of conversations about with many people, not only in California but in other parts of the country. I think there are enough people who really do care about doing the right thing in when you are renovating an older homes. So I can't wait to get this release so that I can spread to all the people I know. Thank you so much, Mary.
Always a pleasure to get to see your beautiful
Yeah.
smiling face.
Oh, thank you so much. Likewise, Mary, I am very grateful.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Home Green Homes. If you found this episode useful, please subscribe and leave a review or share it with someone who cares about better homes and better future. I am Izumi Tanaka, and until next time, here's to creating homes that are healthier, more resilient, and truly future ready.